Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
This story is about a big change for Canada. For many years, Canada and the United States were very close. Their economies and security were strongly connected. Most of Canada's goods went to the USA. American money, technology, and military protection were important for Canada's growth and safety. This relationship was very deep. But in late October of 2025, something important happened in South Korea. This event showed that Canada's main relationship might be changing a lot. Most people around the world did not notice this change. It was a quiet shift. On October 31st, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. They talked for 39 minutes during a big meeting in Gyeongju, South Korea. This was the first time Canadian and Chinese leaders talked face-to-face in 8 years. It was a big moment. Prime Minister Carney called it a turning point and said it was long overdue. He also accepted an invitation to visit China soon. However, this meeting did not get much attention. Another meeting at the same event was more important to the world. President Donald Trump met with President Xi Jinping in Busan, South Korea. They talked about trade problems and agreed to stop their trade disagreements for a while. President Trump's meeting was big news and grabbed the world's attention. Canada's important diplomatic meeting was largely forgotten. But this overlooked story is very important. It shows a big change in how countries work together. It tells us that Canada is making a new and surprising choice. Canada is facing big economic problems from an American government that is not easy to predict. So, Canada is now looking more towards China. This is not because Canada prefers China, but because it needs to for its economy. This story explores why Canada is choosing this new path. 2. A hard time for Canada. Canada faced a very difficult time. The United States, under President Donald Trump, started putting high taxes, known as tariffs, on many Canadian products. In early 2025, these taxes began at 25% for most goods. By August, they had increased to 35%. Products like steel and aluminum faced even higher taxes, up to 50%, while automotives were hit with 25% duties. This was not just a small change. It was a big attack on the way businesses work together across the North American border for many years. These high taxes created big problems for Canada's economy. Canadian businesses found it very hard to sell their goods to their biggest customer. Many companies that had worked closely with American partners were now struggling. From January to April in 2025, Canada's goods exports to the United States fell sharply by 26%. This was one of the most severe trade shocks Canada had experienced in modern times, causing serious worry across the country. Canadian farmers also suffered greatly. Those in regions like Saskatchewan and Manitoba felt a lot of pain as it became harder to sell their crops and other products. Many businesses across Canada were forced into a desperate search for other places to sell their goods before more tariffs could harm them. The trade war also caused problems with exports growing and led to businesses having too many products in storage. Canada then realized a big truth. Its economy depended too much on the United States. For many decades, over 75% of Canada's exports traditionally went to its southern neighbor. This strong link was good when relations were stable, but it became a huge and dangerous risk when the USA started applying tariffs without warning. Canada's economy did not just slow down, it faced a severe halt, showing how vulnerable it was. The Canadian government understood that it could not keep depending so much on American goodwill, which President Trump showed could change very quickly and unpredictably. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government knew they had to find new countries to trade with. This was not just an economic goal, it was an important, even necessary choice for Canada's very survival. They needed to make sure Canada had more than one main business partner to protect its future. 3. A new business partner. Canada and China have had a difficult relationship for many years. There were serious problems between the two countries. For example, China held two Canadian citizens, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, for over 1,000 days. This happened after Canada arrested a Huawei executive. Also, in early 2025, China executed 4 Canadian citizens. These events made many Canadians wary of China. Canada's government worried about China's actions, including election interference and cyber attacks. Despite these issues, China is very important for Canada's economy. It is Canada's second biggest trading partner, after the United States. In 2024, trade between Canada and China was over $118 billion. China has a very large and growing market. It needs many products from other countries to support its economy. With high taxes and problems with the USA, Canada needed to find other countries for trade. The United States, under President Donald Trump, put many tariffs on Canadian goods. This greatly hurt Canadian businesses and farmers. Canada realized it could not depend so much on just one country. So China became a necessary option for Canada's economy to stay strong and grow. China also showed strong interest in more trade with Canada. China's ambassador to Canada suggested that the two countries could triple their trade volume. China needs many natural resources. It wants to buy Canadian oil, gas, canola, seafood, and minerals. For instance, a new pipeline, finished in May 2024, made it easier to send Canadian oil to other markets. At the same time, China began buying less oil from the United States due to tariffs. Instead, it looked to suppliers like Canada. Many Canadian businesses who once sold mainly to the USA now saw China as vital for survival. Trading with China became a crucial necessity for many Canadian companies and for the entire economy. This new focus on China was a big change for Canada. It showed Canada's urgent need to find new ways to keep its economy stable and strong. It was a strategic step taken out of necessity. 4. A different plan. Canada's new government started a new way of thinking about China. Before, Canada often spoke about China with caution. But now, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government began to change its tone. Canada decided it needed to deal with China in a new, more practical way. This did not mean Canada forgot its worries. It meant Canada would try to handle security and business differently. The plan was to be careful about important security issues. For instance, Canada would not allow Chinese money in sensitive defense projects. It would also keep a close watch on China's actions in the Arctic, as these could affect Canada's land and safety. Protecting Canada's values, like human rights, stayed important to the government. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said Canada would talk about its interests and values. This showed that Canada had limits it would not cross. At the same time, Canada also wanted to do more business with China. China has a very large market. Canada needed to find new buyers for its products because of problems with the U.S. market. The Canadian government set a big goal: to double its exports to countries other than the USA over the next 10 years. To do this, working with China was essential. China needed things Canada could sell, like oil, gas, and food. So, Canada wanted to open new ways for trade, and also work with China on things like climate change. This was a difficult path, trying to work with two very powerful countries that did not always agree. Canada needed the United States for many things, like trade and security. But the U.S. government was not always a predictable partner. Canada could not stop working with its old friend, but it also could not depend on the U.S. alone anymore. The government was trying to find a middle way. It wanted to protect Canada's safety and what it believed in, but it also strongly needed to make its economy grow. This was a challenging balance, asking Canada to walk a thin line between its two powerful partners. 5. Making new deals. In October 2025, a big meeting in Asia captured the world's attention. Leaders from the United States and China met in South Korea. President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping had important talks. News reports from around the globe focused on their discussions about trade. Many hoped this meeting would bring an end to the ongoing trade war between the two powerful nations. People closely watched every word and action, thinking this was the most important event of the summit. However, away from the spotlight on Trump and Xi, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney was also active. He attended the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (APEC) summit in Gyeongju, South Korea. There, Prime Minister Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This was their first face-to-face meeting in 8 years, marking a turning point for Canada-China relations. They talked about trade issues and working together on farming, energy, and climate change. But this important step for Canada received very little public notice. At the same time, Prime Minister Carney was busy making more deals in Southeast Asia. He went to the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This was another place where Canada looked for new business partners. He met with leaders from countries like Laos, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Prime Minister Carney also signed a letter with Malaysia to explore new business in energy, like natural gas and renewable power. He invited the President of the Philippines to visit Canada. These were steps to build stronger connections across Asia. Canada also promised 25 million Canadian dollars to help ASEAN countries with a new trade plan for 2025-2030. These actions were all part of Canada's big strategy to grow its economy. The goal was to sell more goods to these new markets and buy more from them. This was crucial for Canada to rely less on the United States for trade, especially after recent problems. While the world watched the big news, Canada was quietly building a new future, one deal at a time. Most people did not see this important work happening. 6. Different ideas in government. Inside the Canadian government, important discussions were happening every day. Not everyone agreed on the new plan for dealing with China. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government wanted to find new trade partners around the world. This was a big and new change for Canada's foreign policy. Some people in the government, especially economic ministers and trade negotiators, wanted to move fast. They were very keen to increase business with China quickly. They saw China as a very large market, full of opportunities. For them, selling more Canadian goods to China was essential for Canada's economy. The main goal was to double Canada's exports to countries other than the USA within 10 years. These officials believed this important economic goal could not happen without a strong trading relationship with China. They pushed for quick action, like removing China's tariffs on Canadian products, especially farm goods. For them, opening up these markets was a top priority, sometimes even more important than other worries. But other people in the government, including Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, had strong concerns. They were worried about security issues. They also cared deeply about human rights. These officials knew that China's government had a different system. They were concerned about things like reports of election interference in Canada, and they wanted strong rules against it. Also, they worried about China's growing presence in the Arctic region, which is close to Canada. These discussions were difficult. They included how to keep talking to Taiwan while also improving relations with mainland China. Many felt Canada needed to be very careful. They wanted to protect Canada's safety and its core values as a democratic nation. This created a real challenge for the government. On one side, there was a strong need to make money and help Canadian businesses succeed, especially after facing problems with its traditional partners. On the other side, there was a clear duty to protect Canada's beliefs, its people's safety, and its national security. It was hard for Canada to work closely with other democracies like Australia, Japan, and South Korea, while also doing more business with a country that has different ideas about human rights and global behavior. The government had to find a careful balance. It meant keeping a close watch on sensitive areas, like security and national defense, and setting clear limits. But at the same time, it needed to open new doors for trade and business in other areas, such as energy and agriculture. This balancing act caused many intense debates behind closed doors. It was a new and very complex path for Canada to walk, full of different ideas and priorities among its leaders. 7. A big risk. Canada's new plan is a big change. Is it a good idea for the country? Many people wonder about this. It is a big risk. The United States of America is not a simple partner anymore. Since President Donald Trump returned to office, things have been very difficult. He has put high taxes on Canadian products, sometimes 25% or even 50% on things like steel. This has hurt Canadian businesses and farmers a lot. Trump has also made surprising threats, like stopping trade talks or asking Canada to say sorry for trade issues. These actions are hard to guess and often change without warning. This means Canada cannot trust the USA to be a steady partner as much as before. For Canada's economy, depending only on the USA is now too dangerous. Canada needs to find other friends to trade with across the world. It cannot put all its hope on one country. But China is also a difficult partner. In the past, Canada and China had serious problems. China held Canadian citizens like Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor for a long time. There were also worries about China trying to affect Canadian elections. China has even executed Canadian citizens on drug charges, and one, Robert Schellenberg, is still waiting. China can use trade to get what it wants, and its interests can change quickly. This means doing business with China also carries many risks. Canada cannot fully trust China with its interests. So, Canada is in a very hard place. It needs to trade to live, but both big countries, the USA and China, have proven to be difficult. This new way of doing things is not easy. It means Canada must be very careful and clever. It has to keep its eyes open for dangers from both sides, while trying to find a safe path in the middle. This new path is full of big risks. Canada is trying to balance many things at once. It needs money to grow, but it also wants to keep its values safe, like human rights and democracy. It must protect its people and its land. This new way is not Canada's first choice or an easy one. Canada is not choosing China over the USA because it likes China more. It is making this choice because it has to. It is a necessity for Canada to find new ways to live and grow its economy. Canada must try to survive in a world where old friends are not always reliable. This is a very big risk, but Canada feels it has no other choice for its future. 8. A new world. The world was changing very quickly. The old ways of doing business and making friends between countries were no longer working well. Canada, a country that had always relied heavily on the United States, saw that it needed to find a new way to succeed. This meant looking beyond its closest neighbor for economic survival. The United States, under President Donald Trump, had become very unpredictable. For example, high tariffs, which are like extra taxes, were placed on many Canadian products, such as steel, aluminum, and even cars. This hurt Canadian farmers and businesses badly, causing their exports to the USA to drop significantly. It showed Canada that depending too much on one country for trade was risky and could lead to big problems for its economy. To stay strong, Canada had to find new partners around the world. This situation led Canada to make a very practical choice: to increase its trade with China. China is a huge country with a big market for Canadian natural resources like oil, gas, food, and minerals. Even though Canada and China had a difficult history, marked by past disagreements and concerns, doing more business with China became necessary. It was not because Canada preferred China over its old partners, but because its economy needed new buyers and sellers to thrive. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government saw this as a vital step to ensure Canada's survival in a world where the USA was no longer a certain and steady partner. The main goal was to make Canada's economy stronger and less dependent on any single country. This new approach was a major change, not just for Canada, but also for the entire North American region. It was the start of a new reality, where countries had to think differently about who their most important partners were. Canada's move towards China, while taken with caution and balancing different concerns, was a clear sign of this change. It showed that Canada was ready to take bold steps for its future. This path was not easy, but it was what Canada felt it had to do. The country was adapting to a world where trade relationships and global alliances were shifting fast. It was a significant step into an unknown future for Canada. How do you think this new direction will change Canada's place in the world?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.